and I'll get home. And that's in 20 minutes or so. So I figure we'll have a few questions. And right first, our board member has a mic from the audience if we can't hear you. So anybody who has a question for either candidate that's fair and impartial, and if it's not, I'm not going to allow it. So you can raise your hands. The lady with the orange song.
I don't know if I need it. Could you speak about your views about the expansion of the Keystone Pipeline? I've read that you do support that expansion of the Keystone Pipeline, and if that's true, would you speak about why?
I would be happy to answer your question. No one was a more ardent opponent of the Keystone Pipeline when it traversed the largest aquifer in the Midwest than me. Nothing could have been more irresponsible than for this country to countenance compromising, potentially threatening such an incredible resource for the people of the Midwest. Now that the pipeline has been redesigned to avoid traveling over the aquifer, we have some hard thinking to do as a people. And there is truth to the fact that the extraction of this energy has consequences. But the American people are not going to be the arbiters of whether that extraction takes place or not. That extraction will take place. The only question that we as a people have to answer is whether, given that that extraction will take place, do we want to put 4,000 Americans back to work with a $7 billion investment and bring that pipeline to Port Arthur, Texas, where, God forbid, this country is ever ensnared in a circumstance where our energy needs are compromised. And I'll say it, I don't want to dance around it. If supplies from the Mideast become disrupted, and certainly none of us want that to happen, but all of us recognize that in the volatile world in which we live, you can't discount that as a possibility. So should that happen, do we want to have 500,000 barrels of oil a day at our disposal to keep our country alive? Or do we want the pipeline to end up in Vancouver, Canada, where we will not have access to that resource? My view has always been, as long as this is going to happen, as long as this energy is going to be extracted, and it's my view that it will, this country will be better served by having access to it in the event that we need it. And that's how I see this decision. So I think, as currently contemplated, and the people of Nebraska, the elected officials in Nebraska, were disappointed with the president's decision because they said, give us the power to direct the route, and if we're happy with the route, we think the president should be happy with the route. So that, I hope that helps to answer your question. You're welcome.
I think it's not at all clear that in fact this really has been dealt with. The aquifer in question is enormous, and it needs a full environmental impact statement to see that, which I do not think has been done yet. And something else on the national security front, which I think is important to know. This oil has already been sold in long-term contracts to Latin America and to foreign countries. Port Arthur, Texas is a trade-free zone designed so that it can be exported. So it is a nice notion to think that it's going to go to Americans, but it's not. In fact, it's designed to go to a foreign port precisely because of the trade advantages of sending that overseas. So again, it is TransCanada doing this. They have these long-term contracts that are negotiated in place. So it would be nice to think that that was going to provide a more secure supply for us, but it is not the economic reality. And we need to deal with the economic reality and the environmental reality. And I think the verdict is still out on the environmental of this change of pipeline, which clearly has not gone through regulatory review. But also the reality of where those contracts have been set. And it's true, if they went to Vancouver, they'd go to Asia. But if they go to Texas, they're going to go to Latin America and Europe. It's not necessarily earmarked for us. And again, this underscores the importance of a long-term renewable energy supply. And I would rather see us as an interim fuel looking at natural gas than at oil sands and adding to that demand, because oil sands is about as dirty as it gets. It is incredibly, the extraction of it is like blowing off the top of a mountain. It's like strip mining and then pouring millions of gallons of water and chemicals through that and then pulling the oil out. It is a dirty, dirty process, and frankly, we should not be supporting it. We should be seeking other solutions.
Hi, I'm from Southbury, and I just want to ask, first of all, the room a question. Could you raise your hand if you're under 45 years old? Okay, so here's my question to both of the candidates. I think that one of the problems that we're having with the environment now is that not enough people are going into the sciences. We found out today from David Poe, who's hosting one of the new Nova shows on PBS, that the United States is number 54 per capita as far as students who go into the sciences in the world. So 54 is pretty low down the line. My lovely stepdaughter, who's here, who just raised her hand, just graduated from Pomperaug High School and is now going to Naugatuck Valley Community College. She belonged to the ecology club, I don't know what they called it, but in high school that never met. So my question is, of course, the future is in her hands and the few young people back here, not so much us. I mean, we're going to do the best we can, but in 20 or 30 years, we're going to be gone. And these are the people who need to take over. How would you both expose more young people to meetings like this, to going into the sciences, to anything involving controlling what is going to happen in their future?
Well, it's a great question, and I actually do think one of the most important ways is to get kids out in nature. I'm a huge believer in experiential learning, and I think an appreciation for the glories of nature is best appreciated by going out and hiking, by learning to identify flowers, by figuring out what is that thing flittering. Oh, is it a moth? Is it a butterfly? And I know for me, for myself growing up, that is how I acquired this passion about the environment, was being a kid. Kids are naturally curious. And frankly, this goes back a bit to education, to a system where we have become so obsessed with teaching to the test that we've forgotten the joy of discovery for children. And I do think it's very important. And I will tell you something we've talked about on the Environment Committee for the Connecticut Community Foundation, is getting young people in our cities engaged with nature. And we are looking at some programs specifically to encourage more young people who grow up in cities, don't have a lot of access to nature, to get out on our rivers, to get out and hike, to begin to appreciate this stewardship notion. Now, if we're going to get the sciences, which are absolutely critical, I think we do need to be looking at the cost of higher education. And we need to be creatively looking at loan forgiveness and other things to incentivize young people to pursue degrees and to pursue areas where we know we need help. And I have a son who's doing computer science and astrophysics. Yes, he wants to be a rocket scientist. And he tells me, Mom, the political science classes and economics classes are so much easier than my physics problem sets. It takes me 20 hours to do a single physics problem set. And sciences are his thing. It's hard. It's hard. And so I think if we don't provide support for young people in the sciences, we shouldn't be surprised that they don't pursue it. And the cost of higher education is so great right now. It's a crushing burden on families. And this is something all of us in this room really need to think about, that is a ladder up and out. Innovation comes in part through sciences. We need to figure out a better way to support robust science education, elementary school, all the way through postdocs. And again, having research and development available so they see a future for those kids who like digging up worms. And then we'll go on to do what we need to get done.
I think that my opponent and I would very much agree on how to jumpstart an interest in science education. And the reality is, it's our responsibility to make science relevant and to teach kids why science matters. And I want to focus on the positive. The Housatonic Valley Regional High School, Regional School District number 1, was the national champions at the Envirothon, I think in 2010 or 2011. Laura, you guys have a great Envirothon team at Marblewood. Litchfield High School under John Markland has an unbelievable Envirothon team. So it's not somebody else's responsibility to turn our kids on to the power of science. It's our responsibility in supporting our local high schools, in supporting our elementary schools, and in teaching our own kids. My son's only 3. But he's learning pretty early. God bless him, because at 7 o'clock in the morning when he gets out of bed, he comes to our room, he says, "Daddy, can we go outside?" And I love to go outside, but it's 7 o'clock in the morning. It's like, Andrew, we have to have breakfast before we go outside. But the best way for all of us to be reminded of the importance of science is to be out in it.
I'd like to just point out one thing. The Conservation District has been supporting the Envirothon program for years, and Gene has been the chairman of the Envirothon committee. And we've got, Gene, something like 30 high schools in Connecticut participating.
Oh, at least.
And we think more this year, and they get together teams and they compete on wildlife, soils, mostly natural, let's go outdoors kind of things, but also design projects, and it is a terrific program that we're very committed to. Any more questions? Let's have another one or two. Dan?
Yes. I'd like to hear both of you talk a little bit about the water. There's a sense that water will be the oil of the next century, if you will. Many of us, if not most of us, are concerned with climate change and all the things we talk about, but we are primarily concerned about water. So could you give me your point of view on the role of the federal government in water and in the management of that resource?
Let's keep it to 2 minutes or less.